We are the children of Holocaust survivors. Ours is a story of what it was like to grow up and live as adults in a world where our parents suffered immense persecution, trauma, loss, and forced immigration. Ours is the story of living in the shadow of the Holocaust as children of the eyewitnesses. Ours is the commitment to tell our story, to carry the torch from generation to generation. This unique project, the oral testimony, is about the transference of trauma from our parents to us, as well as the strength and resilience of children of survivors.
You just didn't ask because you knew. And the details were not something anybody wants to talk about.
And I remember times when, you know, we'd be in the kitchen or something and I'd look at my mother and she would just be crying. And I didn't know why. You know, I'd say, you know, why are you so sad, or why are you crying, or whatever. And she said, you know, I'm just thinking about my parents, or, you know, something like that.
My mom always talked about when they were first taken into the, you know, with her parents and her sisters and her brother.
My father would talk a lot to me about his family and what happened, and he was in Auschwitz and his experience and how he survived at a young age. And sometimes those would be my bedtime stories. And that was his way, I guess, of telling it and having me remember.
I don't recall any teacher really showing an interest in, you know, that we were from somewhere else. I don't think it was talked about the way it is today.
The main understanding of the Holocaust came at 1961, when I was 11 years old, where they had the Eichmann trial. Suddenly the whole country was hooked up to the few TVs. There weren't many TVs, but every neighbor opened his door to every other person to come and watch the trial. And I got attention by people asking me, the non-Ashkenaz, non-European Jews, by asking me, and I realized I better have good answers and real answers. And all I could have told them is actually what I saw on the TV the night before, if I watched.
And inside I would feel like, well, you know, the teacher maybe is surprised or realizes that my parents are different, and could they understand them, and did my mother understand the teacher, and it always seemed to be fine. It was just more what was going on in my head.
It was talked about in a history class. Mm-hmm. We all learned, you know, we learned what went on, but we were never asked to, let's say, stand up and say, you know, where we were from and what we may have remembered. Nothing like that ever went on that I recall. I think there were times I probably felt sort of uncomfortable, and maybe I didn't really want a lot of friends coming over to my home, because my parents had this heavy accent, and they probably dressed differently than my friends' parents might have.
Then the overprotectiveness, something's gonna happen, I'm worried about you, you know, God forbid something should happen, you know, don't go here, don't go there.
I started to do extreme things, just to be part of everybody else, like climbing the highest tree or building, just to be accepted by the other kids, and not like the fragile one that my mother created due to her overprotecting.
And that, I think, was hard for my mother in particular, to accept the fact that I became so independent at such a young age, as opposed to it meaning I'm rejecting. Okay, I think she took that as a sign that somehow I was rejecting her, as opposed to saying, I can't continuously live in that experience. I've got to get on with my life. And I was pretty consistent that way. And I think for a while, it took her a long time to to, I think, accept the fact that I was like that. And she couldn't understand that I never shared with her. I couldn't even verbalize it as I do now, that I made this decision.
But even as a young child, I remember thinking about them, and it worked in the other way as well, where I would develop fears. I developed a lot of fears about losing them. And I just remember, as a child, my father always talking a lot about his experience.
There was a section called Transnistria, which got that name during the Holocaust time. It never existed before. And that was a place where they took all the Jews, which my parents were included there, and made them work, labor work, anything for the German machine of war. And they will decide, you go for a distance of 10 or 20 miles by foot, and whoever made it, fine. Whoever didn't make it, they make sure once he hit the ground, a bullet in the head, and they kept going.
I knew my grandparents perished. I knew that my mother's 3 younger sisters perished immediately.
One of the most phenomenal story, basically, as they push him from one town to another, my mom supposedly gave up and fell on the side of the road and told my dad to leave her there. I think that was after they lost the kids and everything. She did not find why to go on. And he carried her. And I always heard that story. And they were sitting and talking, and I just like somehow heard the whole conversation. And suddenly I realized, wow, I had brothers and sisters, and it was a kind of a curiosity. And you try to relate it to some movies you saw, some other stories you saw. You don't really realize what it means until you can relate it to something. I
always, wish that I had met my grandparents and my aunts and my uncles and my cousins, but, that was something that was different too. When children would spend time with their grandparents, I would say, well, I don't have any, I don't know what that's like.
Out of about 100 distant family members on my mother's side, I would say a handful survived.
My father, for example, amongst his stories, and I'm sure that in some ways affected me, always figured out how to get things done, no matter what camp he was in. He's really quite the survivor, if you want to use that term. It's simply beyond just surviving. He figured out how to survive, and I think if I have a characteristic like him, that's one of them, is that you just sort of figure things out and you just keep going forward.
What I got from them as well was, that studying and school was the most important thing, that education was the most important thing, and to be kind to other people and make them, feel good about themselves and helping others, because that was really their personalities as well. So it was always there, but on their daily life and when they got together with other survivors, it was more they were celebrating life than mourning it. They would have their moments, and I think it was always there. And coming from what they came from as immigrants with nothing and no family and losing everything and no language, to raise their family, to be successful and well educated and instill the values that are so important. It's just a testament to why they survived and how they survived, and the legacy that their parents instilled in them when they were growing up has just been passed on to us. I always have said that we're like this tiny flicker of a flame that was supposed to be put out, and second generation now is having families of their own and thriving in different countries, not only here in the United States, but throughout the world. And I know that, you know, their memories will live on through us and my children.
And I asked my father, how come you didn't stood up like they show in the movies and kill yourself with other Germans, taking them and kill them? And he said, because they will come back and kill more Jews, and I knew I'm going to have you one day. And even at that moment, it didn't hit me. As I go through life, that sentence is always in my head. My father stayed alive to give me life, and I've been giving that privilege to carry on that message of going on with life.
We hope that these interviews have created a deeper understanding for the experiences of children of immigrant parents and show that it is possible to achieve and be successful despite adversity. Ultimately, we hope that these interviews will inspire tolerance and respect for all people.